But as I oftentimes recount, I still remember the afternoon when he came home from work and we all sat down to eat dinner. And he was so excited because he said, I have figured out how to turn cancer on and off by toggling between plant and animal protein. And so I took 2 years off to make a film called PlantPure Nation, and then a year to, more or less a year, to release it. We released it in theaters in over 100 communities across the country, and then it went on Netflix. Now it's on Amazon Prime. But I decided to take those 3 years off because I thought it would create a platform that I could stand on to better execute this big vision I had for a grassroots strategy. When we're supplying these meal starters into under-resourced, underserved communities, we're going to waive 100% of the profit margin. So we're going to take the food right from the factory, right to the people who need it with no profit markup, so that we can make this the least expensive way for folks to eat in those communities.
All right, welcome everyone to selfprinciple.org, a 501c nonprofit that I started. I'm Dr. Sean Hashmi. You know, Self Principle is sleep, exercise, love, and food. And we started this because what we wanted to do was to share knowledge with the world, to share amazing stories of people who are doing incredible work in making this world a little bit better. And today is no different. I'm so delighted to have someone I call a friend, a colleague who's doing incredible work, and you're going to be so amazed by his story. So welcome to the show, Nelson. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Sean. I remember meeting you a few years ago at Kaiser Permanente, and I liked you from the first moment I saw you.
Well, thank you.
You've got a good heart, and I think you're in the practice of medicine for the right reasons.
You know, I think when you met me, I'm not sure if I was completely bald or I still had remnants of hair left.
Yeah, it's been a while since we saw each other, but you may have lost a hair or two.
Well, so there may be some folks, and I find it hard to believe, but there may be some folks who don't know who you are. So would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are? And then we'll kind of take it from there.
Okay. My background is, as I oftentimes say, a socially conscious entrepreneur, and I've done a lot of different things over the course of my life. But much of what I've done has really been oriented toward where we are today. And I started on this particular leg of the journey maybe 10 to 12 years ago now. And over that period of time, I've been working with the team to develop all of the elements necessary to launching a grassroots strategy to help share the message of plant-based nutrition in local communities. And I've had a long time interest in plant-based nutrition. I went plant-based, started going in my late teens and then became plant-based in my 20s because of the influence of my father, Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who co-authored with my brother the China study. And many people may have seen him in Forks Over Knives. So I can blame all of this on him. But at any rate, you know, I have a big, strong, passionate belief in this idea for reasons of health, also climate, you know, the environment, which is a very important issue to me and to many others. And then I think that there are ethical reasons as well that we ought to do this, and that has to do with the last thing you mentioned, loving kindness.
You know, it's so amazing. I think there isn't anybody that I know of who doesn't know your father. And the China study is actually the first book I ever read when it came to my sort of journey down nutrition. And what's interesting about my own journey is I started on the opposite spectrum. I started as a skeptic. My job was for the large organization that I work for, my job was to come up with some kind of a strategy for nutrition. And when I started down this road, it was the floodgates open. I had everybody with their diet coming to me and saying, this is our diet, this is our diet. But what was fascinating was the more I read the more it started to become clear. It wasn't one study, it wasn't two studies, it was thousands. And not only was it thousands, it was different populations, it was different groups. People were living longer, living healthier. You were doing good for everybody else. And what you were finding was that all of this stuff that you were trying to be selfish on by taking care of yourself, you were actually creating all of this miraculous work for the world, the environment, the next generation of people who are going to take over us once we're all gone.
Yeah.
So tell me how, your story is. So you got started by sort of your father's influence, but you have taken it to a whole other level. Tell me a little bit about your work.
Well, I've been thinking about the strategy that we're working on today for a long time, and the roots of that go all the way back to the years that I spent watching my father and the frustration that he experienced communicating this very important message. And of course, he was coming at it primarily from a health standpoint. But as I oftentimes recount, I still remember the afternoon when he came home from work, and we all sat down to eat dinner. I had a pretty good sized family, and we always ate around a big round table. And he was so excited because he said, "I have figured out how to turn cancer on and off by toggling between plant and animal protein." And I remember that very clearly, and I was very proud of him and amazed by what he was discovering. And I thought at that time, that was back in the early 80s, I thought that it would just be automatic, that this information would be communicated to the government and to the public, and within years, everyone would know this tremendous secret about nutrition. And of course, it didn't work out that way, because I also remember him coming home from Washington multiple times, coming home very frustrated and angry because he couldn't make any headway in communicating this through government. And in fact, the status quo, the powers that be, have too often worked to suppress this information. So as I was thinking about this, I put a lot of thought into how can we empower people at the local level to share this message within their communities. How can we do this in a way where we don't have to work through government, we don't have to work through anyone. We can take charge ourselves, sharing this with our friends, family, neighbors. And so I started thinking about all the elements that would be required for such a strategy, and it includes food and grassroots organization, even education, certain kinds of programming, even a web platform. There's a lot of elements to such a strategy. And so I started working on that, focusing initially on the food piece, and I was having a lot of challenges with that. It's a capital-intensive business, very complicated, very difficult. And then the opportunity developed unexpectedly to work on a film. And there's a story that started to develop, and I realized, wow, if I push this further, I could make a movie. And so, and it all starts in Kentucky with the legislative experience that I was involved in there. And so I took 2 years off to make a film called PlantPure Nation, and then more or less a year to release it. And we released it in theaters in over 100 communities across the country, and then it went on Netflix. Now it's on Amazon Prime. But I decided to take those 3 years off because I thought it would create a platform that I could stand on to better execute this big vision I had for a grassroots strategy. And so the film came out in 2015, and it's worked out well. It did create a platform for us, and ever since then we've been working on this strategy.
Well, it's a fantastic film, and I've had a chance to view it, and so has a lot of my colleagues. And I got to tell you, it's amazing. For everybody watching who hasn't watched it yet, strongly recommend you do. So tell me how that launched, and what are you working on now?
So I launched with others, a couple of organizations. One, the company that I had started, PlantPure, I got back to that and launched that. And then a nonprofit called PlantPure Communities. At the end of our film, we have a call to action for people to form local support and advocacy groups. We call these groups pods, because the idea is that we're planting seeds of change in local communities. A lot of people answered that call to action. We today have over 250,000 people who are involved in these pods. And I set up the nonprofit PlantPure Communities to help support that growing pod network. So that's what that, and that's a very important part of our grassroots strategy, is we have to have that local organization. So that's really important. And then within PlantPure, we've been working on food, education, some wellness programming for physicians, something we call our PlantPure RX program, a website at healourvillage.com, which is the vehicle that we're going to use to launch our strategy. And what else do we have? I guess that's it. Food, education, wellness programming, and that web platform, together with our pods, will enable us to launch campaigns in communities across the country to share the health, the environmental, and the ethical benefits of plant-based nutrition.
So on the food portion of PlantPure, what are you guys doing there?
Well, we started out focusing on frozen food, and so we have an extensive line of frozen entrees, and now we're also introducing some additional new frozen products into the marketplace. We launched that initially online. We're now in supermarket chains. And this is an important part of what we do because it's the economic engine. So we have to have some way to support all these crazy ideas that I have. In addition to the frozen entrees, we have more recently, over the past 3 years, we've been working on a new line which just launched a few months ago. This is our meal starter line. And with this, all you have to do is add a liquid ingredient, typically like a plant-based milk, and then some fresher frozen produce, and you can quickly prepare a meal. And we decided to focus on that format because we figured out over the years that's the least expensive way to get a plant-based diet to people. And it's also very customizable. People can put different kinds of produce and different amounts of produce. Maybe they can even put some additional flavoring. So it's a very user-friendly, convenient, and inexpensive way for people to prepare meals. What we have today is our version 1.0. We're already making some additional changes, and that'll be an ongoing process. The other thing we're doing with this line that I'm really excited about, and PlantPure is a very different kind of business. It's very philanthropic. So you might think of Newman's Own. We're kind of a plant-based Newman's Own. When we're supplying these meal starters into under-resourced, underserved communities, we're going to waive 100% of the profit margin. So we're going to take the food right from the factory, right to the people who need it, with no profit markup, so that we can make this the least expensive way for folks to eat in those communities.
Wow. I got to pause you there because that is absolutely incredible. When we talk in organizations, we talk about this holy grail of what is like the best, whatever, name your item that you're going to be selling. And you want it to be cost effective to the consumer. You want it to be fast in terms of convenience. And when it comes to food, everybody says, I don't have time. And you want it to be the highest quality. So, right, the running joke is you can never have all three. And this is the first time I'm hearing that, wow, there's somebody out there that's actually made all three of those components. You have amazing cost structure, which for those people who really need access, because I can tell you, I went to school in Compton in California. It's a really it's an inner city neighborhood. We had every kind of fast food you can imagine, but we never had a chance to get any sort of quality food. So you covered the cost, you covered the speed to make it so easy to make, and you're delivering food that is incredibly high quality. That's amazing.
Yeah, so we are very proud of that line, and it is good quality, and we've gotten good reviews from amongst the people who've been using it. But it's really the pricing that really gets me excited, because to me, accessibility to this is so, so important. You know, I tell a story in PlantPure Nation of my own grandmother who their family was very poor, and she died an early death from colon cancer, and she couldn't get access to health care because they were so poor. And of course, they didn't know anything at all about nutrition, so they ate all the wrong foods. But people shouldn't be born into the world and have to suffer through that for no fault of their own. You know, we need to figure out how to get the message to folks, how to motivate and empower people, and then how to provide that food solution at very low cost. Because our industry, I hate to say this, but you know, the plant-based community, oftentimes it's been a very self-focused movement, you know, focused on one's own health. And we have to focus on our health. That's the first thing we have to do, but it shouldn't stop there. We need to think about how do we get this to folks in need. I remember over the years, I've lost track of how many consultants, marketing consultants, and investors have told me, if you want to sell this message, you must target basically what I refer to as a Whole Foods market demographic. And I think we've done that a lot in our community, and we need to make the tent bigger. We need to bring everyone along.
That's fantastic. Now, you had started talking also about PlantPure focusing on education. Tell me a little bit about that. What's that all about?
Yeah, so we have created some various educational products, which we've essentially now wrapped into one integrated offering, which is our PlantPure RX program. But we have a whole sort of course of education now. We have a health seminar. We've got 10 days of education, which is part of the PlantPure RX program, which has every day people get an email, and each email has links to whether it's a module of the seminar, culinary instruction, or some other video. And we also have put a lot of effort into, in fact, culinary instruction. It's all about the food. You have to educate people, but that's not as difficult as sometimes we think it is. You know, the challenge that a lot of people have is the food piece. And learning how to make food that tastes good, that's aligned with their taste preferences. So we put a lot of emphasis. My wife is a nationally regarded cookbook author, and Kim Campbell, and she authored a book called PlantPure Nation Cookbook, PlantPure Kitchen, and she's just a master in the kitchen in terms of creating new recipes. And she hosted last year. We did about 50 of these shows, cook-alongs, so people can get a grocery list and a recipe the week before, and then that next week they can cook along with Kim in real time. And so we have 50 of these shows as well, which we're wrapping into this PlantPure RX program. The PlantPure RX program is essentially a 10-day immersion where people can, for 10 days, they get this education that I've been talking about. They also get the food support. They get a bundle of these meal starters. They get a couple meal plans. And most importantly, the physician is involved. And so the physician can help, can consult with the person and support the person through the immersion. And then there's pre and post biometric testing. So
wow.
that's the kind of the programming part of this.
That's phenomenal. So going away now from the commercial side, which is PlantPure, going towards PlantPure Communities, what sort of things are you guys doing, and what sort of impact have you guys had?
Well, done a number of different things. I would say that, the majority of PlantPure Communities' focus is on supporting the pod network. We have a program called our Oasis program. We've actually done these immersions in under-resourced, underserved communities around the country. So we've done a number of these projects. We provide general pod support. We've also provided some funding for a really exciting climate study by a world-renowned climate researcher looking at the food-climate connection. And he just completed his study, and it's will soon be published within the next few weeks. But he did what is, I think, the most exhaustive study ever done, looking at the contribution of agriculture, both plant and animal, to annual greenhouse gas emissions. And by rules of the journal where he's publishing, I'm not allowed to share the figures yet, but it's really significant. And his estimates are higher, significantly higher than what the UN estimated.
Let me ask you a question. As we talk about sort of the impact on the environment, oftentimes I'll have people say, well, I'm a meat eater, but I only eat grass-fed. And therefore, it's better for the environment. It's not harming anything. And of course, we on the plant-based side, we understand what that really means. But for some of the audience watching, what is this thing where we talk about the impact of our food on environment? What does that really mean? And how does plant foods play into that?
Well, there are two parts to that story, two chapters to that story. And unfortunately, even in the climate community, the climate research community, according to my friend, Dr. Atul Jain of the University of Illinois, most of the focus has really been on the emissions side, greenhouse gas emissions. How much does farming and animal farming contribute to greenhouse gas emissions each year? And of course, it's a significant contributor. It's one of the biggest, and significantly bigger contributor than is plant-based farming. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But it's very inefficient to produce a calorie through an animal as compared to producing that calorie through a plant. It's far more inefficient. But there's another chapter to this story, and it has to do with land use. And this is something that's not accounted for typically. But if we were in a plant-based world, if we transitioned to a plant-based world, a huge amount of the Earth's surface would begin to naturally regenerate. It would reforest and regenerate. And then there are marginal lands where we can employ more interventionist approaches to help those areas regenerate. But the regenerative capacity of the planet is enormous. And so as the planet starts to regenerate that way, as the land starts to go back to its natural state, it begins pulling carbon down into the biomass of the new growth and then through the roots and into the soil. Actually, tremendous amounts of carbon are stored in the soil. And so grass-fed beef, cows that are just out there ranging and grazing, they don't really change the environmental equation when you see the totality of the impact and where that comes from.
It's such an important point to mention, and I think people so quickly forget that as they're talking about this. There are so many benefits to eating a plant-based diet, but we often only think about what happens to us. But we have children. There's generations that are going to come after us. And I love the fact that the work that you're doing makes an impact on all of those things.
Yeah.
So what is the latest sort of projects that you're working on right now? Are you able to give us a little sneak peek on what's sort of cooking in your mind right now?
Yeah, so something that we're working on right now really represents the culmination of everything we've been working on. By the way, I have to, I keep noticing, I have a camera guy, and he told me this in the past, and I guess I wasn't paying attention. I had to come out to the other room here because someone's back next to my office to do this podcast. So I grabbed a light over there. He said, "Don't ever use that light with an orange shirt because it'll make you look orange." I think I look like a carrot, but I'm not really that orange. So anyways, getting back to the podcast, what are we doing now?
Yeah.
We're working on something that is, I think, the first phase of a national campaign, and we're calling this our Healing America campaign. And this has been a long time in the making. None of this is accidental or random. There's a lot that we had to do to get to this point. What we're doing is we're taking our PlantPure RX program, and we're in the final stages now of creating a community version of this, like a community RX version of the PlantPure RX program. And this is a version that will enable large groups of people to go through the process at once as a group. So rather than a physician prescribing this to an individual patient, this is a program that a lot of people can go through at once. And we have a telemedicine partner, plant-based telehealth. It includes, you probably know Dr. Michael Clapper and Lori Marbus and some others, and they're growing. They're doing well. When people register and come into this group process, we will redirect those people who are on medications like blood pressure medication or insulin to get support from plant-based telehealth as they go through the immersion. Because as you know, Sean, many of those folks are going to require real-time adjustment of their medications because the body starts to heal so fast. And so they'll get that medical support. We also have a very streamlined, simple way for people to get pre and post biometric testing. If they want to get that, they'll have the food delivered to their doorstep. They'll have all that education that I just mentioned. There will be events that people have as they go through this immersion. We'll initially do those online, but eventually, as people get more comfortable coming together, we will have an in-person offering. But and then at the end of all of that, we'll encourage people to either join local pods or to start a pod if there's not one in their community. And so we put the word out to our pod network that we were going to do this, and we got a very strong response. Just in the last couple weeks, I've met with 16 different communities who are going to be launching these or participating in these big immersions. And then the next phase of the campaign is, after we scale this up across the country, because everything I'm talking about here, it's very scalable. We've taken out all the bottlenecks. So, and we'll be producing a lot of media as we do this, videos and stuff that we'll stream out as a way of inspiring more communities to want to jump in and become part of this campaign, to bring this Healing America campaign to their own community. But the next phase of this, after scaling this concept, will be to encourage local communities to get on our platform at healourvillage.com and begin doing some of the other projects that we have hosted on that platform. This is a rather unique platform. A group or like a pod can come onto the platform, have its own set of pages, its own identity, its own group functionality, and its own little filing system for storing resources, pod resources. And then we have projects that we've uploaded to the platform, which essentially are strategies for outreach to different sectors of a community, supported by resources that we've created. And then we have a media feed where we'll be doing a lot of media and streaming it through the network, trying to highlight best practices and innovations so that people in the network can learn from one another. And so we're going to encourage communities to take that next step of engaging in a bigger way. But we're hoping these initial immersions that we're launching will help to plant the seeds for that. It'll help to pull in more people, to a local pod who can then work together to undertake bigger strategies. And importantly, this includes strategy for bringing the message and affordable foods into these under-resourced and underserved neighborhoods.
That's phenomenal. Let me ask you, if there's people out there who want to volunteer or support you in all of these efforts, how can they find out? How can they get involved? Because there's so many people who want to give their time or they want to give their money to causes that are important, that are doing good.
Well, the answer to that is really simple, and that is to go to the website at plantpurenation.com and click on the contact link and write a note. And direct the note to me, and my staff will send it right through to me. There are a couple ways that people can help. One is to consider joining with others in your community to bring this immersion program into your community as the first step of a larger campaign within your community. The other thing people can do to help is we always welcome financial assistance. This has been our biggest challenge, and we've had many challenges. I've lost a lot of sleep over the years, but the money part's always been difficult, and the reason for that is because our organization is an odd organization to a lot of the folks who invest in new ventures. Our strategy has been broader and deeper than is typical with a young organization. You always hear the advice, if you're going to have a company, if you're going to start a new venture, you have to really be focused on a single thing. And I understand that. And we are highly focused at PlantPure. We're always focusing on the next thing that we have to get done. But our strategy is broader and it's more social, so it's a little harder for investors to get their arms around it. And then we've made these philanthropic commitments in addition to provision of meal starters at cost into these communities. We also are going to be sharing 50% of our future profits with nonprofit organizations who are involved in our grassroots strategy, probably demonstrating innovations or best practices that others can learn from. So we're going to channel back a lot of that back into the movement. So all of this makes it harder for us to raise money. And then I've also wanted to raise the money in a way that would allow us to retain control. And that makes it harder too. And you can get a lot of money if you're willing to give up control of your organization to the investor group. And so PlantPure is a fantastic investment opportunity. It's just that it's just been a little harder for people to get to wrap their arms around it. So we always welcome people who have the means to support what we're doing.
That's fantastic. I got to ask you, with all of the stuff you're doing, you must be so busy. How do you take care of yourself, or what are some of the things that you do to try to make sure you got the energy to do all of this amazing work?
Yeah, so being completely transparent here, it's the only way I know how to be. It has been it's been a very stressful journey. I sometimes wonder if I knew on the front end what I was getting myself into, would I have done it? I suppose so, but I'm not 100% sure. So sometimes you just have a tremendous amount of stress, and it's really hard to do anything other than just get through it and get out the other side of it. But I do my best to manage it. And so three things. One is I eat well, of course. Two is exercise is really helpful to me. I really feel it if I can't exercise on a given day. It can affect your moods, but it's a great way to deal with stress. And then the third thing is I do try to find quiet moments, usually in the evenings, weekends. But I think seeking some solitude and quiet, reflective time every day is really important. We have to make room for that.
That's fantastic. Let me ask you, there's so many people who have struggled with different aspects of their health and who are now just starting to hear about plant-based. What are some things that you say to people who are just starting to get interested, who are wanting to get started, but they're like, it just seems there's so much I got to do. I don't know where to start.
So, Sean, that's a really good question. So this is something that we wrestled with in the very beginning. We knew we wanted this kind of grassroots strategy, but I wasn't completely sure because we'd never done this before. The psychology around this, how do you enable people to do this as easily as possible? And there are really two approaches. One is you can throw a lot of education at them, and then kind of hope that they incrementally move in this direction, or maybe once in a while someone just goes cold turkey. I find that approach not to be very successful. We have so many temptations around us, and there is a lot to learn, especially in terms of the food part of this. And so people need motivation. They need the motivation to be able to do all of that. And where's that come from? It's hard for a lot of people. So this is why we came up with this idea of an immersion program. And we have found this by far and away to be the most successful way to prompt people into a plant-based diet. Is we tell people on the front end, look, this is just a 10-day program. You can do anything for 10 days. And the food is good, and it's not like you're going to be out anything anyways. Just hold our hand for 10 days. We'll hold your hand, and we'll walk you through this. We'll educate you. We'll make it easy for you to live plant-based for the 10 days. We'll even have a physician there if you need it, and pre and post biometric testing so you can see the results. And what we find is that a lot of those people who are uncertain, the people you were just referring to, they may be uncertain, but they will say, okay, I can do this for 10 days. That's not, you're not asking me to change my lifestyle. And so, but when people do this and they get a bit of education and they feel those dramatic health benefits during those 10 days, the combination of the education and then that feeling that they get from fully experiencing those health benefits is incredibly motivational. So now at the end of the 10 days, now they have that motivation that they need to go deeper and to figure out, how can I sustain this? So
that's really, really good advice. And I think, this idea of making it short, it's doable. 10 days is doable.
It
Yeah.
is. Mm-hmm. It's not that hard of much of a stretch.
Agreed. So, you've gone through so many struggles in your life, especially, and including your father has gone through so much in paving the way. I think when your dad was trying to do this stuff, it was like this uphill battle, and there was nobody who was talking about it. If you had to say, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned along your journey that maybe somebody out there listening to this who's got a passion for wanting to do good could learn from, what would you say are some of those things that you would want to part?
What kind of bit of advice to someone who wants to help promote the
change?
cause?
Yeah, do good in the community, start a grassroots organization. Yeah. What are some things that they should know when they're like, there's a lot of people who have passion, they just don't know how to get started.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head right there. In fact, that's what's wrong with our society more generally, beyond just plant-based. We have big problems. We have the environmental things we were talking about. We have worsening intergenerational poverty and breakdown of our communities, and a lot of troubling trends. And the only way that we're going to fix these things, and of course it's the same way that we get this health message out, is by empowering people at the local level to come together to fix problems. They are closest to the problems, and there are many people in communities who have passion, who want to contribute, and who want to be part of a solution. But the problem is what you said, is that there aren't any easy ways for people to engage. And that's because we're living within a political paradigm where over 95% of our tax dollar that out of our paycheck goes someplace other than where we live, and we have no control over it. But if we turned our world, it's upside down now, right side up, and empowered our communities and had resources flowing through our communities, then there would be a ton of ways for people to engage. But within the plant-based space, we have developed this particular strategy as a way of giving people that opportunity to get involved. So I would tell people the best thing is to focus on your community. Be local. Don't get online and sit on the couch and have conversations with people across the country. That's okay, by the way. I mean, don't only do that. If you really want to engage, that's not a very impactful way to engage. Form a group in your town, come together, and first and foremost, support one another. You know, that's what our pod concept is about. Typically, our pods will meet maybe once a month around a potluck. And of course, they weren't doing that during the pandemic, but they are coming back together again. And so they have a potluck, and they might have some educational, a speaker or something. It's just social time. So that's important, just being part of a group. And then you can also begin to think about, you know, as a group, you can begin to think about how else could we impact our community. And when you get to that stage, just come to our website at healourvillage.com and, PlantPureNation.com and our nonprofit PlantPureCommunities.org. And you'll be able to utilize strategies and resources to begin engaging in your community, maybe starting with one of these community immersions.
That's fantastic. And that's such good ideas for people. So, Nelson, I got to tell you, this has been so delightful having you on the show. And I'm in awe of all of the amazing work you're doing. And I'm honored to just have the privilege of knowing you and to have some small way of being able to get this message out to people about the work you're doing.
Yeah, I want to say one thing as well back to you is that thank you for what you're doing to help share this information. And, I love the theme of your podcast. I think you're doing really good work, and I know that you were doing good work at Kaiser Permanente. And one thing I think is really important is we have to involve healthcare providers in this movement. And that's one reason we've spent so much time on this PlantPure RX program, because there are so many physicians out there who want to really heal people and who want to use food to do that. And, we, on a societal level, we have to figure out macro strategies for how to engage and incentivize our healthcare providers to be a part of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one more time before we go, the websites where people can go to find out more.
Yeah, so we have PlantPureNation.com, that's the company, and we have PlantPureCommunities.org is the nonprofit. And then this new website that we're just now launching is HealOurVillage.com, which is the social action platform.
Fantastic. Well, Nelson, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Sean.